I've traveled back to the day he confessed his love to me. Kiss her one more time, and we'll let you go. In the dimly lit street, several boys were whistling and cheering lazily. The boy surrounded in the middle had naturally brown broken hair due to malnutrition. When he looked at me, a hint of forbearance emerged in his calm eyes. Blood was seeping from the corner of his mouth. I remembered him. Song, Wade Artolosai, the illegitimate son of the Herald family, died of depression due to campus bullying a few years later. Perhaps during those years of fighting against the disease, I had been vegetarian and devoutly believing in Buddhism. The king of hell couldn't bear to take my life and gave me the chance to return to my senior year of high school. However, this was precisely the most tormenting time for me. My parents divorced. My best friend slandered me. And I was plagued by rumors. So much time had passed that I couldn't remember the specific details clearly. Just like now, in this long and chaotic street, I was actually confessed to. A simple "I like you" isn't something that would etch deeply into one's heart. What impressed me was the boy's eyes. Desolate and filled with despair. There was a moment of silence around. The red-haired boys holding iron bars prodded Song hard, grabbed his hair from behind, and pulled it forcefully. "I told you to go and kiss her. Are you deaf?" Song's school uniform was trampled with several shoe prints. During the rainy season, the cold wind often blows, and the air is thick and humid. Laughter rang out all around. I said, "He's a sissy. With that pretty boy face. It's so disgusting. Look at the belt of his pants. Is he so tight-ass because he's afraid we'll strip him?" Those guys were well-known hooligans from the neighboring school. It took me a long time to recognize their faces. Just as they were about to strike again, I stepped forward with a cold face to stop them. "I'm calling the police. You'd better knock it off." In my previous life, I was a self-abased and cowardly person. Like a weed buried in the dust. That's why they dared to make Song kiss me. Now, when I said this warning, they burst into laughter. "What kind of joke are you playing?" Someone came over and pushed my forehead little by little, making me move forward. "TSK, Hembiskay. Not much ability, but good at scaring people." The corners of his mouth curled in mockery, using words that seemed like praise as sarcasm. I remained silent. My appearance at the moment was indeed old-fashioned. Black-rimmed glasses, a washed-out shirt, and faded yellow jeans. Suddenly, they grabbed my hair. The person opposite dragged Song in front of me. Anand slapped my face with a blade and said with his yellow teeth showing, "Since Song won't kiss you, you kiss him. Kiss once, and we'll let one person go. It's a good deal, right?" Sporadic jeers rang out, and someone took out their phone to take pictures. "I'll count 1, 2. A cold touch came from my face. I glanced at Song. The moment the word 3 was uttered, I turned my head and, taking advantage of the man's complacency, twisted his hands behind his back, accompanied by a scream of pain. I deftly snatched the knife from his hand, but the blade was sharp, and it cut a fingernail-sized gash on my neck. It felt slightly numb. Not as painful as the injuries I got when I was practicing taekwondo in my previous life. Soon, let out a low sigh. There were cries of pain all over the ground. The man who had been full of enthusiasm just now stared at me cross-eyed, covering his vital parts and gasping for breath. Song, with blood on his body, stared at me in a daze. I didn't have time to talk to him much. The moment the police arrived, I pretended to fall to the ground. The buttons of my shirt had been torn off long ago. I pinched my thigh, and tears welled up in my eyes. 10 minutes later, at the police station. "This bitch is lying. We didn't bully her at all." In the interrogation room. When those boys heard the statement I gave to the police, they jumped up in anger, their eyes wide with fury, as if they were going to come over and strangle me. The police slapped the table and shouted, pointing at my neck, "What are you yelling about? Did she tear her own clothes? Did she make this wound herself?" "She tore her clothes herself. She made the wound herself." Someone said something, and the police glared at them, picked up a fruit knife, and threw it on the table. He also threw a stack of documents over. "Do you think I've been a cop for nothing all these years? You guys already have a criminal record. Don't talk nonsense in front of me." They were well-known hooligans in this area. Before, they always used money to settle things. It was only until last week when the detective who took bribes was investigated that things became strict. They were used to not being afraid, but when the police mentioned Song, they immediately wilted. They had been bullying Song for a long time. Soon, Madame Lo Sai. I finished giving my statement. And it was Song's turn. I stared at his fair profile, listening to his calm and hurried speech, and couldn't help but feel sorry for him. I had seen Song on the honor roll before. He was very good at studying. But because of his feminine appearance and introverted personality, he seldom played with others and was quickly isolated and bullied. By his sophomore year, his grades had plummeted and never recovered. I thought that if there was no campus bullying, he could have completed his studies better and even gone to a good university. But now, my own life was in a mess. I needed a guardian to come and pick me up, but I didn't know who to call. Song and I were in the same room. Soon, Madame Lo Sai. Someone pushed the door open and said someone was coming to pick him up. His back was desolate. Years of low self-esteem had caused his shoulders to hunch inwards, and his head hung down for a while. Then he suddenly turned around, his clear eyes shining with light. Thank you. Song was tall and handsome. When his eyelids drooped, his eye bags would show, giving an impression of a faint smile. At this moment, I really took a good look at his face. It was delicate and fair. A face that made people envious. I stood up, smiling at him with curved eyebrows. Actually, sometimes it's good to fight back. Right? When we were fighting just now, Song had helped me. Which was why we were able to subdue those hooligans so quickly. When giving the statement, he didn't tell the whole truth either. This should be his first time fighting back. Right? The light in Song's eyes flickered. He looked at me for a long time, then softly replied and went out. There was no clear answer. I watched his thin figure, feeling a bit stuffy in my chest. In my previous life, I didn't have much interaction with Song, but I had always been paying attention to him. Besides the scenes of him being blocked in the alley, what impressed me deeply was seeing him lying in the bathtub with blood gushing out. At that time, I was just a coward. The room was empty and quiet, and the footsteps outside could be heard clearly. I picked up my phone and stared at the contact list for a long time, not having the courage to click in. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. The police said someone had come to pick me up. I looked up in a daze and followed the officer's guidance to sign. Still in a daze. Excuse me. Who came to pick me up? I hadn't even made a call. The young policeman put away his notebook and motioned with his chin towards the door. I looked over, only to see fallen leaves on the ground. Among them, a black car passed by. I frowned. Just as I was about to say there was no one, the policeman who had spoken to me had already left. Half an hour later, I took a DD ride home. With the busy senior year studies, I hadn't been back for a long time. Now, every step I took brought back familiar memories like a gushing spring. Through the gate of the courtyard, I heard the arguing inside, accompanied by a few dialect curses and the sound of glass breaking. The neighbor next door was sitting at his door peeling corn, occasionally glancing at my house. In fact, the arguing had become a common occurrence. Their voices were so loud that they could be heard across the street, disturbing everyone. Today in my previous life was the day my parents divorced. The old man of the Yu family was patriarchal. Since my mother hadn't gotten pregnant again over the years, he had long been instigating my father to find someone else outside. And that woman was pregnant. I leaned against the wall, exhausted, looking up at the sky, feeling a bit lost for a moment. I could pull my mother out of the abyss, but it was impossible to wake up a man who had cheated. Inside the courtyard, a water kettle was thrown out of the door and rolled down the slope to my feet. This was something my mother and I had bought from the market before. I took a deep breath. After the neighbor went back into the house with the basket, I pushed the door open and entered. The noise inside had subsided a lot. Grandpa Yu was wearing reading glasses, playing chess in the courtyard. Hearing the sound, he looked up. The interest in his eyes disappeared completely. I had always known that he didn't like me. Mom, heading plafeld my say. I'm back. I pushed the half-opened door wider, and a ray of light shone into the dark room, revealing the mess inside incisively and vividly. Miss Hong was sitting on a wooden small bench, her hair sticking to the back of her neck, and the tear stains on her face hadn't dried yet. When she saw me, she scolded me unhappily. "What are you coming back for at this time?" "I'm on vacation, so I came back to have a look." I picked up the things one by one, cleaned up, and then walked towards Kevin, who was sitting aside, still leisurely eating sunflower seeds. "You're going to bring that woman home, right?" His hand stopped, and he looked at me in slight surprise. Less than 2 seconds later, he became irritable again. "Since you know, tell your mother to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau with me to get the divorce papers as soon as possible." "Kevin, do you have a heart?" As soon as these words were out, my mother immediately flew into a rage and poured out all the hardships she had suffered over the years with a choked voice. In fact, I had heard these words so many times that I could recite them backwards. I listened silently until she finished scolding. The moment she started crying, I took a tissue to wipe her tears. After calming her down, I walked towards Kevin and, for the first time, bravely and seriously negotiated with him. "Divorce is okay. But we want the house in Shuiyu Bay, the car, and the storefront in Jinkui Market." "Are you robbing?" Kevin exploded at this. He threw away the sunflower seeds, his eyes wide with anger, and pointed at me, cursing. You've only been in school for a while, and you dare to meddle in adults' affairs. You're so unfilial." "Unfilial? Huh. I've been hearing these 2 words for a lifetime. Now, they don't affect me at all." I asked calmly. "So, do you still want a divorce?" "What I'm asking for is not excessive at all. In my past life, because I was too laid back and my mom was in grief, we got nothing." Kevin was fond of having fun, and most of the things in the house were painstakingly done by my mom. The only thing he provided at the beginning was this old house. Now, let him have it with that mistress who's carrying someone else's child. "Grandpa, you has an old house," he declared long ago, and it would only be transferred to Kevin when he had a son. Plus, Kevin had long been tired of my mom's unkempt appearance at home, so he couldn't resist the temptation and had an affair outside. Kevin was so angry that his chest was heaving violently. But now he was bent on getting a divorce. He glared at me, gritted his teeth, and only reluctantly agreed under my insistence. I curled my lips. Kevin thought he was about to marry a young lady who lived in Uxiu Mansion in Shenzhen. Little did he know that she was a gold digger carrying a bastard and looking for a home. It was not until the divorce procedures were completed and the house was transferred that I took Ms. Hong back to Shuiyu Bay. During this period, Ms. Hong's emotions were unstable several times, and I could only stay at home with her. The day before going back to school, I finally had some free time to buy study materials. Not many people lived in the community. On the day I came, I had already visited each household with grapes, so I had a general idea of who lived where. As I was waiting for the elevator, the door of the next door house suddenly opened. It was very sudden. I knocked on the door of this house for a long time yesterday, but no one opened it. I instinctively looked over and saw a tall and slender man in a black windbreaker 2 meters away. He turned his face, and I looked directly at him. The next second, my heart couldn't help but shrink. Max, Song's eldest brother. I remembered him not only because of his extremely handsome face and cold temperament but also because of some of his deeds that were well known in Shenzhen. As the eldest son of the Herald family, Max, at a young age, with his skilled operations and sharp vision, reversed the endangered situation of the Herald family. Unlike people from other wealthy families, he was amiable to others. Therefore, the title of National God became popular throughout Shenzhen in an instant. It's a pity that when this phrase became popular in the whole city, Max died young. I don't know the specific reason. I only know that a year after his death, someone found his small account on Zhihu. His diary was recorded on it. I secret love diary. I skimmed through it. And what impressed me the most was the quote from "Gentle wind passes through the hall. You are an accidental wind through the hall. Yet you alone stir up a mountain torrent." Not only me, But everyone was surprised by this. In the eyes of everyone, Max was an outstanding person, devoting himself to his career without any gossip. But who knew that in the snowy winter, he piled up a snowman all night for the girl in his heart. The diary recorded all his secret love schedules. That girl might be ordinary, but she had a great influence on him. It was like buying a ticket to a scenic spot. On the way, you might encounter more beautiful scenery. But he wouldn't stop. He would only keep going to the end to see the final scenery. In this world, the rarest things are preference and determination. Max was an extremely affectionate person. Even now, I was still as incredulous as before, staring at his handsome face. And for a moment, I forgot to look away. At this moment, he was already standing beside me. The elevator was narrow, and the iris grass scent on him rushed into my nose. I instinctively moved aside. To outsiders, Max exuded an imposing aura even when just standing there. Moreover, I had just been caught peeking at him. I really felt guilty. It only took a few minutes from the 10th floor to the first floor, but it felt like a century to me. Even taking a big breath felt like a sin. When we reached the 2nd floor, I secretly glanced in Max's direction. The metal elevator door just reflected his clean and slender figure. His bone structure was extremely elegant. With this glance, I unexpectedly met his eyes. After a few seconds of silence, he suddenly raised his brows and nodded at me with a smile. I couldn't help but hold my breath. As rumored, Max was indeed amiable. The elevator door opened, and I immediately stepped out. Behind me, Max also came out. It wasn't quiet around, but perhaps because of my nervousness, the sound of his shoes touching the ground behind me seemed particularly loud in my ears. I even had an illusion that the sound was getting closer and closer to me. Just as I was thinking about whether I had left something behind, a black car stopped steadily in front of me. A man wearing sunglasses got out of the driver's seat. He opened the door and walked to Max's side. As he passed by me, he gave me a mysterious smile. I was stunned. The bookstore was quite far from here, so I walked aside and started to call Aditi on my phone. It was the rush hour for work, and the driver would arrive in 6 minutes. I looked around and noticed a shaded area not far away. Suddenly, someone patted me on the shoulder. In front of me was a smiling face. Max's assistant asked gently, "Miss you. Where are you going? Would you like us to give you a ride?" His voice was very gentle. Perhaps the influence was profound. Even Max's assistant was so amiable. What surprised me was that he actually knew my name. The screen showed that the driver had cancelled the order due to something. And Max's assistant saw it too. Smiling even more brightly, he considerately opened the backseat door. When I got in, I found Max sitting beside me. When I got in the car, he turned his eyes to look at me. And his eyes were calm. The iris grass scent around me became stronger. Only then did I realize what had happened in such a short time. You had actually gotten into the car of the national god Max. It was like a fantasy. In my impression, in my past life, I had no intersection with him at all. The gap between us was like heaven and earth. I never dared to hope to know him. Even the cowherd and the weaver girl had magpies building a bridge for them. What did I have? Miss you. While I was lost in thought, a low voice came from beside me. I turned my face, and Max's voice returned to its previous clarity when he spoke again. "Thank you for what happened to Song." Up close, heading fulfilled wide sigh. I could see Max's shallow eye sockets and long and slender eyelashes. As soon as he finished speaking, the doubts in my heart were answered. All he did was for Song. In my previous life cognition, Max was a workaholic and rarely paid attention to Song. Plus, had he fulfilled my say, Song was an illegitimate child, which further confirmed that their relationship was not good. Now, it seemed that I had misunderstood a lot of things. I smiled awkwardly. When I accidentally saw the car wall, I thought of the black car that passed by the police station yesterday. Looking at Max's profile, I pursed my lips and asked bravely, "Mr. Harold, were you my guardian that day?" "Yes." Max's eyes were still on my face. The warm sun shone in through the glass and hit the outline of his profile. making me feel dazed for a moment. His profile seemed a bit familiar. Thank you. I thanked him slowly. It was nothing. But this unintentional help was very important to me. If it hadn't been for Max's help yesterday, I didn't know when I could get out of the police station. Nor could I have dealt with Kevin, that gambler, in time. The navigation soon showed that the bookstore had arrived. I thanked him again and got out of the car. Max got out of the car too. The wind was slightly cool, blowing up his black windbreaker, making it billow. Through his shirt, I could faintly see his firm waistline. I moved my eyes to his face and asked in confusion, "Mr. Harold, is there anything else?" He took out his phone. "May I have Miss Yu's contact information?" Then he added, "Well, I'm usually busy with work. If something like this happens to Song in the future, could you let me know?" His attitude was amiable. And these two questions dispelled all my misgivings. I opened the QR code for him to scan and left a note. "Miss you. Then we'll see each other in the future." Max left, leaving me standing there in a daze. It took me a while to realize what he meant. If Song knew he had such a loving big brother, would he hesitate when choosing to cut his wrists a year later? On the day I went back to school, I got up very early on purpose. Ms. Hong's condition had almost recovered. When I went out, she stuffed me a glass of milk and told me to be careful on the way. Touching the warm glass bottle, a warm feeling welled up in my heart. She had become visibly haggard these days. But I hadn't noticed any of this before. Instead, I even resented her. My nose suddenly became sour. And I stepped forward to hug her. "Mom. Thank you. Okay. Go quickly. Don't be late." I didn't move. I gently tucked the white hair on the top of her head inside and hugged her tighter. Half an hour later, I returned to the dormitory according to my memory and put all the materials I bought yesterday on the bookshelf. I was the first to arrive. Not long after I sat down, Vivian ran over from the next door dormitory. She familiarly took the red stool under the table, stood on her tiptoe, and looked up at me cautiously. You had, I heard you beat up the gangsters from the neighboring school and sent them to the police station?" She tried hard to hold back her excitement, looking as harmless as before. But if you listen carefully, you could still hear a hint of nervousness. I stopped tittying up the table and turned my head to meet her smiling eyes. "What? Are you afraid I'll send you there to accompany them?" I asked, propping my head up and smiling. Vivian was slightly startled, and her eyelashes behind the glasses trembled. Just as she was about to play dumb, I changed my tone and sighed. "Don't worry. Considering our good relationship, if you do something to betray me again, I might not only send you to accompany them but also make you end up in the ICU." I smiled and tucked her messy hair behind her ear, then smiled sweetly. "What do you think of this proposal?" Her eyes widened, and she forced a few dry laughs. She held my hand and asked jokingly, What are you talking about? Weren't you bullied with me before?" "Yes. Before. I thought Vivian really regarded me as a good friend. Before. When we warmed each other. Whenever someone came to pick on us, I would step forward to block them. So all the conflict were directed at me. Previously, I even thought her personality was as self-deprecating and introverted as mine. Until I discovered that she had staged all of this herself. Just because my name, you, was the same as hers before she changed it. She wanted to drag me into the abyss. But is it the past now?" I pushed her hand away with a cold face. "But I don't want to be bullied anymore. Here's what I propose. I'll give you 2 days to remove all the information on the forum slandering me as having a mental illness. How about that?" When Vivian heard this, her originally red eyes flickered a few times. She seemed surprised that I knew about this. 2 seconds later, the stool scraped harshly against the tiles as she stood up, looking distressed. You have. I admit I left you alone yesterday. But they threatened me. I had no choice. Otherwise, I would have lost my life. You can't believe their rumors. I didn't spread those messages." Her voice was already shrill. And with this outburst, it felt like thousands of ants were crawling in my head. My head started to ache again. My eyes fell on the Valium in the corner of the locker. and I furrowed my brows tightly. Vivian had someone get this for me before, saying she had a relative who could get it without parental permission. I was kept in the dark about what happened before, and in fact, I didn't want to recall it at all. I massaged my temples, took out the bottle, and threw it into the trash can. Wearing a mask for too long gets tiring. To be honest with you, I'm not sick, and I can sleep well. I cooperated with you just because our names are the same. Which was kind of fun, wasn't it? But you're just too greedy. Slandering others is illegal. You know. Your father is running for election recently. If something happens to you. I didn't finish my sentence, leaving her to imagine the consequences. Vivian is the least favored daughter in her family, and all she hopes for in this life is to be valued by her family. I think she's smart. Soon, let out a low sigh. Vivian explained on the school's all-purpose wall that it was all a misunderstanding. I don't know what the outcome was, but she was the one who initially spread the information. As my best friend, her words are more believable to others than if I were to explain. The courses in senior year of high school are very intense. With so much time having passed, I've almost forgotten the knowledge points. I have to review according to the content in my notebook as soon as possible. Fortunately, had in fulfilled way in session. I had you can use, been exposed to. Hear a lot of things in those years. Overall, it shouldn't be too difficult. Time always passes so quickly. A gust of wind blows. The curtains flutter. And fallen leaves swirl. The phoenix flowers on the playground are bathed in warm light, and the sunset is approaching. Before going back to the dormitory, I went to the wasteland I used to like. It was now full of chrysanthemums of various colors. White, yellow, orange. They can always bloom in full splendor in places where no one pays attention. I think people should be like that too. Have you heard about what happened to that person in class 15? Suddenly, a boy and a girl came out from behind the rockery. The two were holding hands, and the boy was showing his phone to the girl. I heard he was blocked, and his pants were almost pulled down during the holiday. Didn't they succeed? Right? There's no video either. Do you think? After being bullied for so long, why doesn't he cry? He's so strong. The girl's regretful voice gradually faded away. I curled the corners of my mouth slightly, finding it rather ironic. The words so strong coming from her mouth were truly sarcastic. It was Vivian who told me that Sam was an illegitimate child, and also that he was in class 15. So just by hearing these few words of conversation, I could tell they were talking about Sam. But it was all made up. Those people didn't even have the chance to take a video. It was just a pity that there were no cameras around. Thinking of Sam's face, I sighed. In my previous life, perhaps because of my cowardice, I caused indelible trouble for Sam. In this life, if only fate wouldn't be as cruel as a mischievous child. Then, let out a low sigh. It would be a happy ending for everyone. That afternoon, right after class, I bought some snacks and went to Sam's class. He had few friends, and everyone treated him like a plague. Anyone who wanted to get close to him, whether male or female, would back off after hearing the rumors. Class 15 of grade 11 is quite a distance from the senior year teaching building. During the holiday, everyone was gossiping. Now, every time I walked through a corridor, I would be stared at with strange looks. Then came whispers. The saying that gossip can kill is true. In the past, I was so scared that I stayed at home all the time, and eventually even missed the college entrance examination. Come to think of it, Song and I really are in the same boat. When I arrived at class 15, I randomly stopped a passing girl and asked her to call Song out for me. The girl was stunned, her eyes flickering, and she ran away without answering. Class 15 has the worst academic performance and discipline. But I didn't expect someone to be so impolite. Through the door, the shouts of people playing Dudijou, a popular card game in China, could be heard. I lifted the bag in my hand and walked towards the front door. Pushing the door open, a strong smell of cigarette smoke wafted into my nose. Looking around, everyone was looking down at their phones. I remember the head teacher of this class is new. So they dared to be so presumptuous? The door was a bit old, and when I pushed it hard, it creaked, as if worried that a school leader was coming. Everyone in their seats looked up. I scanned the room but didn't see Song. After a long silence, someone recognized me and whistled at me openly. But no one said anything. Having learned from the previous experience, I knew that asking anyone wouldn't get me an answer. So I simply left with my things. On the cement floor corridor, the walls were engraved with non-mainstream, a subcultural trend in China. I love you. Is with someone. Is so slutty. Looking along, the name that appeared most often was Song. Perhaps because my mental age isn't at this stage anymore. I even think they're ridiculously childish. I waited at the end of the corridor until class started. When I caught the teacher who was going to teach class 15, I found out that Song wasn't in class. The teacher said this was normal. Song didn't ask for leave and just skipped class. It's normal for a teenager to have a bit of a rebellious streak, but the problem is that when we were at the police station, Song didn't seem that dejected to me. So why didn't he come to school today? These past few days, I would occasionally wander around class 15. At first, I thought Song had his own thoughts. But 3 days passed, and he still didn't come to school. On Friday, I simply went to see their head teacher. When I heard that Song's student file recorded him as an orphan, my pupils dilated. Don't worry, classmate. Song oft and doesn't come to school. It's not just him. Many students in our class also stay at home. The head teacher looked at my worried expression and casually took a sip of red date and wolfberry tea. It seemed this teacher was actually proud of it. I didn't know what to say. I stared at him for a while, then angrily retorted, "That seems getting your teaching license was really easy for you. Teacher." Of course. He understood the hidden meaning in my words. But before he could get angry, I quickly left. Only a fool would stay there and get scolded by a fool. Back in the dormitory, I took out the phone I had hidden long ago and called Max. Max was indeed busy. The first time I called, he didn't answer. I didn't have high hopes. Since he lives in the same community as me, I thought I might run into him when I went home. But 10 minutes later, Max called me back. "Miss you?" His voice was slightly deep, and the current made it feel tingly in my ears. I subconsciously touched my ear. A bit surprised. "Why yes. It's me." I didn't think much about how he knew my number and got straight to the point. "Mr. Harold, Song hasn't come to school for 3 days. Do you know about this? Have you called his mother?" "Song has a mother?" I asked his head teacher. "There's no contact information for his family on the record. In other words, Song has been in school as an orphan for so long, and no one has ever come to his parents' meetings." The other end of the phone was so quiet that I could hear a sigh. I think Max was also quite surprised by this. "Don't worry. He'll be fine." His tone was gentle, and his voice was soothing, as if it came with a built-in calming agent. My originally nervous heart was instantly soothed a lot. Then Max added, "How about this? Are you free on Sunday afternoon? I'll take you to see him." "Yes, I leave too." "I am." "Okay. I'll pick you up then." The environment on his end seemed to have changed. It was even quieter than before. There was the sound of a shutter folding. And then it was quiet again. You could hear a pin drop. I thought he was waiting for me to hang up first. So I was about to say, "Buy beer." Just as I opened my mouth, Max suddenly asked softly, "Is class over?" "Huh?" I replied obediently, feeling he was being so polite. "Yes, had une fulfilled session. I'm just about to go home. Then, go to bed early tonight. Don't think too much." Okay, I don't know why. Although Max isn't openly protecting Song, every word he says is persuasive. That night, after finishing my homework, I lay quietly in bed. The environment in Shuiyu Bay is completely unfamiliar to me in this life. But I've been sleeping well since I came here. However, tonight I had several dreams. In my dream, I went back to the stage when I was taking medicine. My consciousness became hazy. Vivian said that once in the middle of the night, I went to her dormitory with a kitchen knife. After that, rumors started to spread like wildfire. Even though I don't remember this incident at all, with so many different versions going around, I felt like I could be drowned by the gossip. It was at that time that I was secretly reading in the back hill of the school and witnessed Song being pressed into a pond full of water hyacinths by several people. His chin was lifted, and those people covered his head with lotus leaves, teasing him. They burst into laughter. Song's back was straight, and when he was pushed and staggered, he was forced to turn his face. That was the first time I looked him in the eye. Unlike my usual situation, he was covered in injuries. From a distance, I could still see his bruised cheekbones. But his eyes were cold and piercing. I was frightened. I've always been timid and didn't even think about calling for help. I just focused on running outside. I don't know how long I ran. But I no longer heard the laughter behind me. After that, I never saw Song in the back mountain again. That pond seemed to have been filled in. The bloodstains hadn't been cleaned up properly. And then covered with stone slabs. Looking like a poppy blooming in a rift valley. The bloodstains spread little by little, forming a black river. Darkness fell all around. And as I was in the middle of it, I heard someone gasping for breath. The breathing was rapid, as if being choked by the throat and having the lifeblood pinched. It was pitch black all around. And I wasn't sure what mood I was in at that moment. Only when I shone the luminous bend forward did I see a tall figure. He was leaning against the tree trunk, hunched over, with his chest heaving violently. The light of the pen was weak, and when I turned it to the maximum, the pale outline of the man emerged, his forehead hair soaked with cold sweat. His breathing seemed to have become much smoother. And the stone in his hand was thudded and dropped to the ground. It rolled to my feet. The touch under my feet was soft. And the upper of my shoes was wet. The strong smell of blood filled my nostrils. My head became dazed. And suddenly my hand was grasped by a touch of coldness. "Are you light?" The man's voice was full of a broken feeling. His jawline was tightly tensed. And his wet hair was stuck to his forehead. The moment he raised his face, panic spread in my chest. It was Kevin's face. "You. Get out here right now." The alarm clock was vibrating wildly. And the door was being slapped non-stop. I suddenly opened my eyes, staring blankly at the ceiling, with a dull pain in my head. This wasn't the first time I had dreamed of this scene. I touched the sweat on my forehead and took a while to get out of bed. I opened the door, and Kevin's ugly appearance came into view. I only opened the door a crack and looked at him expressionlessly. "Have you forgotten that we have no relationship?" Fortunately, having fulfilledly, I asked my mom to go to the temple for a few days of quiet rest. Otherwise she would have to see this unpleasant sight. Kevin raised his hand to push the door open. I pushed a little harder, pushed him out, and slammed the door shut. "You'd better think it over. If you keep making trouble, I'll call the police." "Go ahead and call," he shouted. "You're so heartless at such a young age. I don't know how your mother taught you. Now that you've got what you want, you still want Xiaomin to have a miscarriage, right?" Xiaomin was his mistress. I happened to run into her at the hospital last time. But what he said didn't make sense. I'm already 24 in terms of mental age. I'm not young. I didn't waste any words and called the police. While I was handing the situation over to the police officer, Max just came out of the elevator. He was tall and slender, and the camel-colored windbreaker and turtleneck sweater on him gave him a bit of the look of a male led in a Korean drama. When he saw me, he raised his brows, and my eyes were completely attracted by the tear mole at the corner of his eye. Kevin made a big scene before being taken away. And more or less, the people in the community were curious. I didn't hide anything and told it to Max like a joke. He seemed to enjoy it. With one hand in his pocket, looking in the direction where the police car left. After being silent for a long time, he asked with a smile, "Do you need my help?" His voice was very soft, and the intonation was rather charming, as if he was joking. When looking at his face again, you would find that his expression didn't change much, except for a hint of a faint smile in his eyes when he looked at me. I was stunned and awkwardly waved my hand. "It's not a big deal." The people around had already scattered. We were standing face to face. And occasionally a gust of wind blew, blowing my already messy hair all over my face. Standing here in the wind seemed a bit silly. I was thinking about asking him where he was going. As if telepathically, Max also spoke up. "Do you want to have breakfast together?" "Huh?" Well, my assistant queued up for a long time to reserve a seat at Panglai Pavilion. It would be a waste if I went to eat alone. Is that so? People of your status should be used to this. Right? But since we weren't familiar, I didn't have the nerve to say it out loud. We were going to meet again in the afternoon. And to avoid embarrassment, I agreed. People say that after living a lifetime, one should have tasted all kinds of delicacies. Only when I was really sitting in the private room of Panglai Pavilion did I realize how humble my previous life had been. Delicious food is actually just so, right? I comforted myself like this. Max helped me pull out the chair, took off his coat and put it on the hanger, and then took my bag and placed it together. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing a small section of strong and firm wrist bones. He poured a glass of juice and placed it in front of me. Do you have any pressure in your study recently? Orange juice. Which I like to drink. I thanked him. Took a sip. It's okay. There's not much pressure. In fact, I was under a lot of pressure. Reborn in this life. I thought I could have all the answers and excel in the college entrance examination. But in reality, I was messed up right at the beginning. I wondered why I couldn't escape the pit of the college entrance examination. He smiled. Really? Is Miss You that amazing? I coughed. This form of address gave a sense of teasing. But if you really count, he's 25 years old now. And the age difference between us isn't that big. I felt that I was just a bit embarrassed by the word classmate. I covered my red ears with my stray hair, raised my head, and smiled faintly. Of course it's fake. Max's smile deepened. His fingers intertwined, and his gaze fell on me. So, do you feel pressured having a meal with me? I was stunned. At this time, the friendly voice of the waiter came from behind. Hello. Your steak. As she approached, my gaze followed the waiter's movement and landed on the plate. With a click, the sound of the plate touching the porcelain surface rang clearly. My vision started to blur, and my heart was beating so fast that it seemed to jump out of my chest. Blood. The juice of the steak flowed down along the broccoli. In my direction. Cold sweat broke out on my back. The scene of a river of blood in my dream emerged again. My mind went blank. In my line of sight, there was Max's anxious expression. Max's crystal clear eyes suddenly showed a cold look, and his whole body was imposing. His voice was cold and deep. Take it away. The waiter was frightened and then quickly looked at the order in her hand, her face turning pale with shock. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is filet mignon. I made a mistake. I'm really sorry. The waiter pushed the door and went out, and the surroundings became quiet again. Max patted my back gently but consolingly to soothe me. Don't be afraid. This isn't blood. It's miogolin. I didn't say anything. Closed my eyes tightly, and tried to relieve the tension in my body. After a while, my breathing became smooth, and I waved my hand to Max. I'm okay. Thank you. Maybe it was the stress disorder caused by last night's dream. Do you want to go to the hospital? No. I'm really okay. Max frowned tightly, stared at me for a long time, and then picked up his coat without saying a word. Before I could react, he lifted my arm, helped me put on my coat, and pulled me out. He always acts resolutely. When I came to my senses, I was already in the elevator, looking at the reflection in the glasses. My heart skipped a beat. My fingertips curled slightly, and I instinctively tried to break free from Max's hand. Sorry. Max sighed, his tone no longer as before, returning to calm, but his brows were furrowed, and his jawline was sharp. The car drove forward smoothly. I lowered my eyelashes, looking at the buildings passing by outside the window, and my eyes couldn't help but fall on the man beside me. The warm sun shone in through the window, scattered on his broken hair, casting a shadow on the bridge of his nose, making his features more three-dimensional and profound. I stared fixedly at his profile, looking at his eyebrows and eyes, and my heart seemed to be hit hard by a hammer. In my mind, the man's hazy voice rang out again. Are you light? When I came to my senses, my fingertips had unconsciously landed on Max's profile. My nervous heart didn't ease until I got out of the car. My ears were so red that even my broken hair couldn't cover them. Max had already informed the hospital before coming. As soon as we arrived at the lobby, The dean immediately came to greet us. "Miss you. This way." He greeted Max respectfully and then briskly led me forward. Max was right behind me. As soon as I took a step, he followed suit. My scalp felt numb. Just a few minutes ago, I apologized to Max and he accepted it. But I still felt strange. I was just being stupid. Why did I have to touch his face? I was so embarrassed that I could almost dig out a recreational vehicle. "You go in first." Max looked at me and helplessly rubbed the space between his eyebrows. I nodded like a bobblehead, while the dean was arranging the instruments. I quietly opened Zhihu. I still remembered the name of Max's small Zhihu account from my previous life. He was cold-tempered, but his Zhihu name was extremely cute. It was called Fresh Shrimp Noodles. But when I clicked into the search interface, there were only 2 users. One was Fresh Shrimp Noodles with scrambled eggs, and the other was Fresh Shrimp Noodles. Neither of them was the right one. After thinking for a while, I clicked on the latter. However, there was nothing. The dean's voice sounded, "Miss you. Have you had hematophobia before?" I looked up, turned off my phone, and shook my head. I explained again that it was an accident just now. Maybe it was because I had been dreaming about blood these days, which led to this stress disorder. The dean looked at me for a while, stroked his chin, and nodded, "Okay. Then please follow me." I followed him blankly. Later, I found out that I needed to do a full body check. When it came to the last item, the mental and psychological test, my fingers unconsciously tightened. The whole process took only an hour. But it felt like a century to me. The scattered pictures in my mind finally came to an end with the dean's snap of his fingers. Result: mild depression. I stared blankly at the report in my hand. My heart was filled with mixed feelings. In my previous life, I had severe depression. So now, there are many things I can't remember clearly. Max was sitting outside the consulting room. As soon as the door was pushed open, he immediately stood up, his eyes scanning over me. "Are you okay?" "I'm really okay." I shook my head and couldn't help but laugh. The dean, let out a low sigh, who was behind me, nodded upon hearing this. Later, I didn't listen to what he said to Max. When Max got into the car, I took the initiative to tell him that I would take Aditi home. Just then, Max's phone rang. His face visibly turned ugly as he listened to the phone call. "Got it." I thought he was busy, so I repeated what I said just now. "So, shall we meet tomorrow?" Max opened the car door. He had left his coat at Panglai Pavilion, and his assistant brought him a new black windbreaker, making his figure look slender. He opened the door of the passenger seat and motioned for me to get in. "I'll take you to see Song right now." "Huh?" Thinking about the phone call he had just made. Perhaps it was related to Song. I didn't dare to delay and quickly got into the car. The car drove from the main road to the side road. The journey was so smooth that I couldn't help but fall asleep. When I woke up again, it was almost evening. There was a black coat covering me. Judging from the scent, I could tell it was Max's. In the distance, the setting sun was about to set but still lingering. Streetlights came on one by one, illuminating the desolate surroundings. This place was completely beyond my imagination. Max had actually driven for several hours. "Are we not there yet?" We were going to Song's hometown, and Max had only said it was quite a distance away. But I didn't expect it to be this far. "We're almost there." As Max finished speaking, the car stopped steadily by the roadside. Not far away was a people's hospital. A sense of foreboding welled up in my heart. I frowned and asked, "What happened to Song?" "He was admitted to the hospital this afternoon." He didn't go into details, but I could probably guess. However, a few minutes later, when I saw Song lying on the hospital bed through the window, his face pale and his slender wrist wrapped in gauze, my heart still tight and involuntarily. Why was this happening? "You said he'd be okay, didn't you?" I asked subconsciously. The situation was a bit sudden. Max furrowed his brows, staring at the ward with a gloomy expression. Kids at this age have so many thoughts. I didn't know what he meant by that. All I could think about was the image of Song lying in the bathtub in my previous life. So, before that, Song had tried to cut his wrists more than once. What did the doctor say? I sighed, feeling a sense of powerlessness. He's out of danger. Seemingly trying to ease the tense atmosphere, Max put his arm around me, led me to sit on the bench in the corridor, and comforted me with a smile. Don't worry. He'll really be okay. Max had said this at the beginning. But in the end, Song was still lying in the hospital. I didn't say anything. My mind was in a mess. And I just wanted to wait until he woke up to talk about it. Suddenly, the sound of rapid footsteps came. Before I could look up, there was a slap, and a handprint appeared on Max's face. I widened my eyes, staring blankly at the overbearing lady in front of me, and stood up to block Max. What are you doing? The woman didn't reply. Her eyes were blood red as she pointed at Max. This is all because of you. What are you pretending for now? Max kept his head tilted, his fingertips sliding across the corner of his mouth. He chuckled, then stood up. His 1.8 meter tall figure exuded a sense of oppression. The woman wanted to step back but forced herself to hold her ground. A warning blurted out. You people from the Herald family are all cold-blooded animals. If anything really happens to Song this time, you'd better get the money ready. The woman scolded for a long time. Finally, heading to Feldway when she was out of breath and wanted to strike again. Max firmly grabbed her wrist. He pushed her back, stood with his hands in his pockets, and his gaze fell into the ward. Ms. Liang, Bell, do you know what Song wants? He took out a bank card. When the woman reached out for it, he retracted it precisely, and his eyes became sharp. He wants love and care, not money. The woman's face turned ugly. She stared at him with wide eyes, breathing heavily. Finally, having fulfilled my sigh, she slapped the door of the ward and shouted loudly. If you're not here to give money, what are you doing here? Your father asked you to take care of him. And this is how you take care of him. Get out of here. If it weren't for you, Song would have shares in the Herald family. What kind of act of kindness are you putting on now? The woman shouted hysterically, like a shrew in the marketplace. Even at the moment when she was taken away by the security guards, she still stared at Max viciously. I stood there you can use, dumbfounded here. And my heart hadn't calmed down since the woman appeared. That sense of confusion came back again. I had never come across these things in my previous life. Or rather, in my previous life, I had never met Max at all. So many things were changing now. Don't be afraid. At this moment, a pair of big hands gently stroked my head, and Max's gentle voice rang in my ears. The woman just now was Song's mother. He asked if I wanted to know what was going on. After hesitating for a moment, I nodded. Song found out that he was an illegitimate child when he was in his sophomore year of high school. At that time, his grades were indeed as good as I thought. But Max learned from Song's psychiatrist that he had severe depression, and was also suffering from persecutory delusions. This is a kind of thinking disorder and a pathological belief that greatly affect one's mental state. When Harold's father was on his deathbed, he told Max to be a good big brother at the last moment. Although he had been dissolute in his life and had never given Max any love in terms of family affection, the child was innocent. So even though Max was busy with work, he would find time to arrange for someone to take care of Song and bring him home during festivals. Unfortunately, Song's mother, Zhang Peng, was not an easygoing person. After learning about this, she clung to Song by virtue of their blood relationship. After a while, Max's mother also became selfish. Knowing that they couldn't raise a potential threat, she secretly had the mother-son pair taken back to their hometown. No one expected that at that time. Song was almost abducted into a pyramid scheme. After that, his temperament changed greatly, and his emotions became even more unstable. After learning about this, Max rushed to the back hill of the school to find Song. When he arrived, Song was picking lotus leaves. The weather was bad at that time, and there was news of a thunderstorm. It was almost evening when Max finished his work. The streetlights were a bit dim. However, not long after, the school had a power outage. There were many bushes in the back hill, blocking all the moonlight. It was pitch black, and Max couldn't even see Song's face. But when it came to this point, Max didn't seem to have the desire to continue. I asked in a timely manner. Later. Did he go with you? I suddenly understood why Max paid attention to Song. Perhaps it was out of guilt. Did Max feel responsible for Song's current situation? However, Max was silent for a long time regarding this question. Then, he let out a low sigh. As if thinking of something. He smiled and changed the topic. There was a little accident. But fortunately, a girl saved me. Huh? I joked. Did you fall into the lake? Otherwise, why would he need to be saved? Max tapped my head and couldn't help but laugh. What are you thinking? It was just a minor accident. Just as I was about to say something, Max's assistant called him. During the call, he looked in my direction, nodded in response to the person on the other end, then walked over to me and said, "It's getting late today. I'll have someone arrange a hotel for you. You can stay here tonight. What about you? Aren't you staying?" His words of refusal seemed to be on the tip of his tongue. But the next second, a faint smile appeared in his eyes. "I'll stay." The next day, Max said Song had woken up. My first reaction upon hearing this was joy. But somehow, I always had a bad feeling. All along, I had been trying to help Song according to my own ideas. However, I never asked if he was willing. Nor did I understand the whole story. When our eyes met, he seemed surprised to see me in this situation. His eyes fell on Max behind me. His eyelids narrowed, and his face looked a bit unpleasant. "Student Song. My name is Yu. Do you remember me?" I reached out my hand, wanting to shake his, as a formal way of getting to know each other after all this time. He didn't move. He pulled the quilt over himself, revealing his hideous wound. His handsome face showed impatience. "What did you want to do in our class?" I was slightly startled, surprised that he knew about this, and shocked by his tone. "She just wants to be friends with you." Behind me, Max helped to explain. This situation was a bit beyond my imagination. I stood there dumbfounded for a long time before you can use, reluctantly here squeezing out a smile. "Song. Actually, I've wanted to be friends with you for a long time. It's just that at that time, I was too timid." Song's eyes narrowed slightly, as if weighing the truth of my words. Finally, having fulfilled what I had said, he frowned and turned his face away. He didn't say anything. I had prepared what to say in advance and wanted to try to persuade him that Max actually cared about him. However, when I saw his indifferent look, the words on the tip of my tongue just couldn't come out. It seemed that I had been self-righteous all along. I suppressed the sense of frustration in my heart and gave him a faint smile. "It's okay if we don't be friends. At least we're schoolmates. Right?" I introduced myself again. "Hello. Student Song. I'm your schoolmate. You." Song's expressions softened a bit. His clear eyes still sparkled, but his manner was a bit perfunctory. "Hello. You." In my eyes, he was like a hedgehog, and his tone was particularly unfriendly. "Don't look at me with that pitying look. I don't need it. We're all strangers. My mother doesn't even care about me. What's your identity?" After that, he sneered. "Big sister-in-law." I listened to what he said, stunned. I was quite surprised by this address. Looking at the calm Max, my mind was in a mess for a moment. I said, "She's just worried about you." Max pulled me behind him, his tone a bit annoyed, and I said, "I don't need it." Song tightened his jaw. The atmosphere was tense. I stood there, feeling extremely embarrassed. Finally, heading to failure, I couldn't stand it any longer and left in a hurry after saying goodbye. Sitting on the chair outside the door, I leaned against the wall and looked at the ceiling. Couldn't help but recall the scene of meeting Song. From my previous life until now, the number of times I've talked to him can be counted on my fingers. One time was at the police station, and the other was just now. It's normal for kids these days to have a bit of a rebellious streak, especially since Song's emotions are often unstable. Just then, without a lull sigh, a crashing sound came from the ward. I was startled and rushed over. As soon as I reached the door, I heard Max's voice. You is the first person in such a long time who is willing to be friends with you. Why do you have to disappoint her? She saved me. And I've already thanked her. Song's tone was firm. She used to avoid me. Why don't you ask her what her purpose is this time? With that, Song sneered. And you, Harold, since I left you to die in the back mountain, why do you still care about me? Hearing this, I suddenly thought of what Max had said before. So at that time, if it hadn't been for that girl, would Max have been gone? At this moment, I finally understood why Max was so affectionate in his diary and condescended to build a snowman. A life-saving grace should be repaid with a fountain of gratitude. Don't always think about such things. Max's tone was as calm as water. I've arranged for a doctor. You should have a good treatment from now on. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a snap sound, and something else fell to the ground. Song shouted. I said, I'm not sick. And take you away. I have nothing to talk to her about. This kid is quite stubborn. I sighed. At such a prime age, it would be a pity if Song couldn't see the world. Song, even if you do this, your mom won't look at you. So it really doesn't make sense. If you study hard and have the money to support her, she might be very happy. As I was about to leave, I heard Max's cold voice. Song fell silent. So, Song is like this because of a lack of love. Right? Back at the hotel, I sat on the balcony for a long time. The security guard of the community sent me a video. Kevin was causing trouble at Shuiyu Bay again. At the moment, my mind was in a mess. I didn't have the mood to outwit Kevin for now. I asked the security uncle to help pull the person away and sent a message to my mom, telling her to have a good time there. Taking advantage of the free time, I simply took out my phone and started doing exercises. Unexpectedly, I fell asleep while doing it. When I woke up, the sunset had already set. Max had called me many times. I awkwardly explained and said that I would stay here again tonight. What I didn't expect was that Max, who was busy with countless affairs every day, also stayed here. But he was really busy. After dinner, he went back to the hotel to work. I buried myself in my work. When I finished, it was already past 1 o'clock. Maybe it was because I slept too much in the afternoon. In the middle of the night, lying in bed, I tossed and turned. What echoed in my mind was Max's voice. Why do I feel like I've forgotten something? However, I couldn't remember anything. The moonlight outside the window was finally covered by the clouds. I couldn't hold my eyelids up anymore. And a bit of tiredness gradually came over me. I had a dream again. The same dream as that night. In the dark environment, the man's outline was flickering. There was a faint groan echoing in my ears. Then came a series of breaths that were difficult and rapid. Faster and faster. As if on the verge of suffocation at any moment. I was still the same. Hesitating in place. I wanted to shine the flashlight forward, but I couldn't move at all. I could only sense the heaving chest in front of me through the light reflected from the ground. The man's outline was in a blur. Like a traveler in the desert longing for water. He slowly crawled towards me. The moment the light appeared, I was about to see his face clearly. Suddenly, a shrill sound rang out. I was awakened by the scare. The sound insulation affected the hotel was very poor. Almost the second I woke up, I could tell that the sound just now came from Max's room. I thought it was a mistake and ignored it. However, after a while, there was an even more intense sound. I was startled. Afraid that something might happen to him. I quickly got out of bed. I wanted to turn on the light but found that the power had gone out at some point. I took my phone and turned on the flashlight, then rushed to Max's room. The moment my hand grasped the doorknob, I wanted to call someone over. As a result, the door opened. The cold air in the room hit me. And the heavy breathing swept through my mind at this moment. In the dark space, it was impossible to tell the direction. I shone the flashlight forward and found that there was no one on the bed. I walked forward and stumbled over something. The breathing became more and more rapid. And I changed direction. The light fell on the corner of the door. And I saw Max curled up on the ground. His head was slightly lowered. His forehead hair was dripping water. His lips were pale. and the veins on his neck bulged due to difficulty in breathing. With the bright light, his facial features and outline dispelled the last bit of my remaining consciousness in the dream. It seemed that I had found the outline in my memory. I gradually realized that Max might not be able to be in a closed and dark state. I quickly turned the flashlight to the maximum and shone all the light on him. His rapid breathing became much smoother. He seemed to have entered a nightmare. And his whole body was shaking. The shirt on his body was soaked with sweat, creating a water stain on the ground. Max. In my impression, Max had always been as calm and noble as an autumn moon over an ice-covered pond. Seeing him like this, I felt panicked for the first time. When I touched the coldness on his face, I could no longer remain calm. I quickly put down my phone and wanted to get the quilt. Suddenly, my hand was pulled. Looking down, I found that Max was still asleep. His body was still shaking violently, just unconsciously trying to get warm. Seeing him like this, my heart ached inexplicably. I squatted down softly and gently held him in my arms. "Be good. Don't be afraid." I remembered the twinkle, twinkle, little star, that Ms. Hong sang to me when I was sick. I tried to sing it to him, hoping to soothe his consciousness. Gradually, his body relaxed. His breathing also returned to normal. Perhaps because he was afraid of the cold. Max's hand around me was also slightly trembling. I was getting a bit tired from sitting. I wanted to pull away and drag him to the bed. Before I could move, he turned over and hugged me tightly. After rubbing against me a couple of times, my head rested on his shoulder. He seemed to be acting coquettously. I thought in this confused state of consciousness. The tense state disappeared, and I gradually felt sleepy. In a daze, I seemed to hear a low voice above my head. "It's so good. It's you again." The next day when I woke up, I found that I was already lying on the bed, and Max was lying beside me, propping his head up and looking at me, with obvious amusement in his eyes. I blinked in a daze, and my eyes lingered on him. He had changed his clothes. He must have woken up long ago. "Are you hungry?" I've ordered breakfast. Max was no longer in the mess of last night. He got out of bed and actively brought the breakfast over. After setting up the plate, he smiled again and said, "The hotel toothbrush is not easy to use. I've had someone prepare a new one." Thinking of last night, I felt a bit embarrassed for a moment. It must have been him who carried me to the bed. How dare he? Seemingly seeing the hesitation on my face, Max curled his lips and said, "Well, since I was going to carry you, it didn't matter how I did it. And thank you for last night. Miss you." His voice was smiling, and I felt a bit annoyed. For some reason, Max's smile seemed to be bewitching. Early in the morning, my heart rate accelerated abnormally. I had never felt this way in the past 20-odd years. Strange. Really strange. I was really flustered. I ignored him, left a "you're welcome," put on my shoes, and ran out frantically. I didn't even realize that I was fleeing in such a hurry. Song came to school recently. When he saw me, he acted as if nothing had happened. As if the scene in the hospital before no longer existed. But I still remembered my original wish and could only shamelessly approach him. After doing this several times, everyone knew that I was Song's friend. Since Vivian transferred schools, everyone's attitude towards me had changed. Whether they realized their mistakes or were just being fickle, gradually, they no longer looked at Song with the strange eyes they used to. Look. Actually getting along with others isn't that difficult, right? Sitting on the steps of the back mountain, I was chewing on a few dog-tail grasses and smiling at Song. Since being discharged from the hospital, Song had changed a lot. At the moment, he was holding an English Express and reciting it, with his eyes closed. He ignored what I said. I didn't say anything either. When he opened his eyes, I said everything I wanted to say. "Song. Actually, I have superpowers. I know that in the 3rd year of high school, you will lie in the bathtub, covered in blood. Do you believe me?" I don't know which word irritated Song. He suddenly looked at me, and his eyes were not as calm as before. I shrugged and deliberately exaggerated. "I'm serious. That year, You seem to have become the top scorer in the college entrance examination. But you didn't have the chance to enter the university. Song. That time was much more serious than the last time you cut your wrist. It even made it to the headlines. I don't know if it was because what I said was too strange or something else. But Song directly frowned. What nonsense are you talking? He suddenly stood up. I shouted at him. Do you dare to bet with me? Song stopped in his tracks and turned around, looking at me. The corner of his mouth curled into a sneer. The provocation method won't work. I'm not sick. I sighed. He always said he wasn't sick. But he didn't know that he was already seriously ill. When I went home on Friday, I opened my usual notebook. Since junior high school, I'd had the habit of writing a diary. But perhaps due to the medicine, I've forgotten most of the content. So when I saw the diary entries, I would subconsciously imagine the scenes. Imagining all the scenes of Song being bullied recorded in the diary, I gradually realized that I had developed a consciousness of wanting to pull him out of the abyss. Because I ignored him in my previous life, I wanted to fulfill this in this life. But it seemed that it wasn't as simple as I thought. My fingertips landed on the diary. At this moment, I couldn't feel the mood I had when I wrote these words in the previous life. The diary was thick, recording things from junior high school to high school. I repeated a grade in primary school. To be precise, I'm already 19 now. I recalled my 18th year in the previous life. At that time, my parents hadn't divorced yet, and we went to Hua in a mountain. That day, the weather was very cold. I was wearing a red scarf and saw the snow flying all over the sky in my dream. Everyone stepped on the snow with their boots, leaving one footprint after another. Couples walked hand in hand, encountering each other in this romantic season. Now, looking further down in the diary, I saw several snowmen. They weren't just plain white. They were wearing scarves, had carrot noses, big obsidian eyes, and were grinning at me. Some were carrying George bags and wearing cool hats. My drawing skills have always been good, but when I saw the lifelike snowmen in the diary, I was a bit dazed for a moment. It was different from what I had initially imagined. But the problem was, I don't remember seeing the snowman. I rarely write marks on a painting. But on this one, I wrote a lot of words. Today, I seemed to see the person I saved on the back hill. His silhouette looked so much like the one that night. It should be him. He's countless times more good-looking than that night. As if he stepped out of a comic. How could someone look so good in a military green coat? This is the first time I've looked at him openly. And we even made eye contact. He smiled at me. It felt so unreal. I thought I was dreaming. It must be a dream. Otherwise, why haven't I seen him for so long? Looking at these familiar characters, I furrowed my brows tightly. That year in my previous life was when my illness was at its worst. My consciousness was in chaos. And many things were like a movie playing in reverse, frame by frame. Now, seeing this again, my long dormant memories seemed to be awake and bit by bit. The snowman. It seemed to be something that happened last winter. There were paintings on the paper, as if in a fit of bending, and there were also marks of the paper being torn. Later, on the blank page, I saw a few words. Max. I envy the bright moon on the river in vain. Pat. The diary fell to the ground. I gradually realized that I wrote this when I was 18. Only, I had forgotten. Flipping through the previous secret crush-like notes again. My mood was like a toppled spice bottle. The first time I saw Max, I just thought his face was familiar. But in the photo, he was so cold. As if subconsciously disliking that expression. I couldn't recall where I'd seen him. Later, the silhouette from that night in the hotel made me think I'd found the answer. But it wasn't the absolute answer. The reason it was familiar was that I had once had him in my heart. So, the snowman I saw when I was 18. The one in the painting. Was it built by Max? Thinking of the secret crush diary he wrote on ZHI, who in my previous life. My heart started beating inexplicably faster. My gaze fell on these scribbled yet emotion-filled sentences. And I felt a bit dazed. At the age of 18 in my previous life, I actually had someone hidden in my heart. This realization both surprised and delighted me. The biggest problem, however, was that I didn't dare to face it. So I avoided Max for a month. Actually, it wasn't really avoiding. Since I lived in the school dormitory, I couldn't go back to Shuiyu Bay. So I naturally didn't see him. Half a month later, some leader in the school made a rule to give senior year students some relaxation time. They invited intellectuals to give speeches to boost morale. That's when I saw Max again. To be honest, we only contacted each other occasionally. And it had been a long time since our last contact. But just thinking about the content of the diary and seeing his face, my heart would still beat faster involuntarily. Come on. We're all adults. Can this heart-beating thing be a bit more mature? Stop beating like this. You would too. He's looking at you. My desk mate suddenly pulled my arm. Her tone excited. I didn't want to know. I lowered my head, not daring to speak. After the speech, I huddled in my seat like a quail, waiting for everyone to leave before I moved. But when I looked up, I saw Max again. He was talking to the principal. I didn't know if he had been staring at me or just happened to look over. We made eye contact across what seemed like a vast distance. My phone rang. He sent me a message. Why are you avoiding me? A few seconds later, another message came in. Song has started receiving treatment. When? A few days ago. Half of the stone in my heart dropped. Next, it was time to deal with those who bullied Song. I had makeup classes until Saturday. On Sunday, I went to the neighboring school to report those hooligans. However, to my great surprise, those people had been suspended. Something happened to those guys' families. They lost their backers. And the school isn't protecting them anymore. The dean of the academic affairs office said to me earnestly. I walked out of the school in confusion and sent Max a message asking if he was behind this. Yes. He actually admitted it. And so quickly. Imagining the expression on his face when he said this, I couldn't help but smile. On the eve of the college entrance examination, I went back to Shuiyu Bay. Kevin was so afraid of being driven away by the community security guards that he didn't come when I wasn't there. Unfortunately, heading for Fieldley, the day I went back, he showed up at the door. Unlike before, when he was rude and unreasonable, this time he came with big and small bags. Smiling as he rang the doorbell, my mother opened the door. Almost the moment their eyes met, Kevin eagerly put the things in. When I came out of the kitchen, he was already holding my mother's hand affectionately, pouring out his grievances. It turned out that he had found out the child in that gold digger's belly wasn't his. Now, he was thinking of getting back together with my mother. I laughed, picked up a spatula, and hit the back of his hand hard, then threw out those bags of online bought snacks. I don't feel like sweeping the floor right now. Get out of here. Kevin, who had been looking pitiful, stopped pretending when he heard this. This is between me and your mother. What are you, a kid, interfering for? I raised my eyebrows, crossed my arms over my chest, and stared at him coldly. I stared at him until he got scared. Then I held my mother's hand and asked, Mom, do you still love him? My mother, probably because she had been with me for a long time, also got angry. She wasn't as weak as before. She sneered and echoed me. If you were gone, I'd only care if his coffin is touch screen or slide cover. Oh well. Sorry about that. After staying in the temple for so long, my mother became a 5G savvy netizen. Kevin was so angry that his chest heaved, and his neck turned red. Just then, when all sigh, Max came out leading a dog. With a gentle pat, the black and white border collie quickly ran towards Kevin. After barking a few times, Kevin was so scared that he fell to the ground. Before leaving, he didn't forget to take the gifts he had brought. The second surprise of the day was that my mother asked Max to stay for dinner. And she even asked me to accompany him to stroll around the community. The breeze blew across my face. I simply tied my hair into a bun and caught a glimpse of Max from the corner of my eye. He was dressed exactly as described in the diary today. In a military green coat, a turtleneck sweater, and his soft broken hair hanging lazily on his forehead. When he smiled and asked me what gift I wanted after the college entrance examination, I finally realized what love at first sight felt like. My heart was beating so fast that it didn't seem to be mine anymore. I want to see snow every year. I lowered my eyes, avoiding his gaze. Then I hope I can take you to see snow every year. At this moment, it was as if he was making a promise. I admit, I'm not a straight-laced girl. But when I heard this, I ran away. Behind me, Max's voice was still echoing. He said he wanted to pick me up on the day the college entrance examination ended. However, on the day the college entrance examination ended, I only saw my mother. Ms. Hong was wearing particularly eye-catching clothes. Standing at the gate, I recognized her at a glance and ran over to hug her. When we went back to Shuiyu Bay, I subconsciously looked next door. The door was closed. This liar said he'd come to pick me up. Looking at the chat history with him, I was getting annoyed for not receiving a message. In the evening, I sat on the tatami, took out the diary again, and fell asleep while reading. Then had a dream. The cold wind carried the smell of snowflakes, and that weak groan seemed to disappear. The man's familiar and clear voice, full of laughter, called me Yu Yu. Yu Yu like a naughty imp. My chaotic consciousness detached from my shaky body. When I opened my eyes, the fog dispersed, and the vague figure in front of me gradually became clear. That handsome face was so close. His lips were like ripples on the water, cool and gentle. They seemed to be in slow motion on the corner of my mouth, easily making me sink into a tender feeling. Do you like this? His eyes reflected the faint moonlight, and his tenderness was not only shown on his lips. When I wanted to reach out and grab him, he was like a goose feather fluttering away with the cold wind. Finally, heaven toffelvlayed, the heavy snow collapsed. I woke up in a fright. Gasping for breath, still in a state of shock, I touched my burning face. Like a cat that had stolen something. My heart was pounding non-stop. Student you, what wonderful dream did you have? Suddenly, a teasing voice came from the empty room. I was stunned. Only then did I realize that I had somehow dialed Max's phone. Did I talk in my sleep just now? Thinking of that scene, I really didn't dare to ask. I took several deep breaths before saying, Max, are you busy? I'm at your door. I was stunned. The door was opened, and Max stood tall and straight at the door, with one hand in his pocket. His figure was slender and neat, and he was still wearing a trench coat. There was a layer of blue-gray under his eyelids. Didn't you sleep? I'm really sorry. I was really busy today. He took out a bouquet of flowers from behind his back, apologized to me, and then asked, the college entrance examination is over. How do you feel? His answer by asking made me a bit dazed. Recalling my mood, I replied cheerfully, of course I feel great. Then, has your wish changed? Did he mean he still wanted to take me to see snow every year? I didn't answer. Instead, I asked him a sudden question like he did to me. Max, do you want to date someone much younger than you? The corridor was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. On the surface, having fulfilled my essai, I was calm. But inside, I was extremely nervous. Max, why aren't you answering? Living to lifetimes. This was the first time I was so brave to take the initiative. Max suddenly smiled, opened his coat, slightly lowered his head, and his eyes were clear. Is that okay? His soft broken hair added a touch of softness to him. I looked at his broad chest, as if there was some kind of telepathy. A gust of wind blew, wrinkling my sweatshirt and pressing it tightly against my body. No. And I don't want to let you escape either. Before I could reply, Max came over and hugged me. His coat trapped me tightly, and his big hand pressed my head against his chest. I've been waiting for you for a long time. We were so close that our heartbeats seemed to resonate. I couldn't tell whose was whose. Max and I got together. However, Max has been liking to ask me some strange questions recently. For example, what if he died one day? Before I could say anything, he would say he was content. At this time, he would hold me tightly in his arms, wrapping my cold little hands so tightly that they felt as if they were roasted by the fire. Shenzhen is indeed a city that doesn't snow. But when I was 22, we went to Hua Inn and Mountain. It was my suggestion. At first, Max didn't agree. He said he had already bought tickets to other places. But this place was quite important to me. I wanted to go there with Max. In my previous life, we smiled at each other. It was as if we were separated by a galaxy. Looking at the lovers around us, touching each other's faces. Their smiles were as pure as the snow on the ground. This life, I wanted the same. I want to touch Max's nose with my fluffy white gloves. Hold hands with him. And leave big and small footprints on the snow. Write down each other's names. And then naively draw a heart. This time, let me build a snowman for him. Max, are you nervous? Before boarding the plane, Max stayed in the toilet for a long time. The hand holding mine was icy cold. Although his expression didn't seem different, I still sensed his strangeness. These days, Max has been very strange. He rarely has nightmares. But every time he wakes up startled. And finally hugs me tightly. As if he has regained something he lost. His strength is so great that it seems he wants to integrate me into his body. Every time, I would take the initiative to kiss him to sink him. Only then would his breathing become a little smoother. And then he would coax me to sleep instead. It's okay. The plane is about to board. Let's go. He took my hand. And I walked beside him, looking up at his profile. The light from the sky refracted into my eyes. That face was clearly close at hand, but it gave me a sense of being illusory. I held Max tightly. My left fingertips slightly spread, trying to see more clearly. Suddenly, a violent force hit me, accompanied by a "Can't you watch where you're going?" I came face to face with that man carrying big and small bags. He turned his head to look at me, glaring at me maliciously, and then scurried away in a hurry. My steps suddenly stopped. Looking at the man's back, memories suddenly came flooding back. Staring at Max's tall back, my nose felt a little sour. Max, can we not go to Huanan? I remembered how Max died. In this year of my previous life when I was 22. I also went to Huanan. But I went alone. It was my first rebellious long-distance trip. Although I had made a travel plan long before departure, an accident still happened. The source of everything was the man just now. He was on the same flight as me, followed me all the way, and finally pulled me into a room when I was skiing. Fortunately, I was saved at that time. The man who saved me was wearing a quick-drying suit. His helmet and ski goggles covered half of his face, leaving only a clear outline. But later, there seemed to be an avalanche. Before the avalanche, he was stabbed by that lewd man. My eyes fell on Max's chin, nose tip, and lips. My eyes were red, and I rushed over to hug him. Max, let's change the destination. What's wrong? Max noticed my unease and looked back at me. I shook my head, covering the soreness in my eyes. No. I just suddenly don't want to go to Huanan. Let's change the ticket now. Max was silent, staring at me with deep eyes. Afraid that he would see something, I exclaimed, "Oh." And cockathiously said to him, "You gave me options before. I want to go to the place you chose." After a long while, Max smiled helplessly. "Okay. Then let's go." After changing the ticket, I went to the route manager and told him that there was a high possibility of a snow mountain collapse in Huanan Mountain. But all kinds of weather conditions proved that such a thing would not happen. No one could have the ability to predict. He thought I was a crazy troublemaker. I was absent-minded all the way. After getting off the plane, I checked the news from time to time, wanting to know the situation in Huanan Mountain. As a result, I was told that that flight had been cancelled. Amidst my shock, a snowball was thrown at me. Max said helplessly, "Miss you. The snowman is ready. Don't you want to take a photo?" "Right. Take a photo." I completely relaxed. With the speed of running a 50-meter dash, I pushed Max down into the snow, grabbed a handful of snow and smeared it on Max's face, and said indulgented, "What kind do you like? I'll make one for you. Can you make one like you?" "What's that supposed to mean?" I pouted, glared at him, and was about to get up when he hugged me around the waist and pulled me into his arms. He gently brushed aside my stray hair, touched my red nose, and laughed heartily. "How about we make a mini version of you?" Obviously, it was winter. but I felt hot. I stared at his face and changed the subject. Max. Your eyelashes are so long. Do you want me to pluck them for you? Wow. He's really generous. I just said it casually. No. He laughed. Lifted me up. And held me. His warm breath fell on the side of my face. Then how about having a child? Max. I was a bit annoyed by his train of thought. I buried my face and didn't look at him. He was being particularly improper today. Okay. Just kidding. Max smiled and patted my shoulder, pinching the two ears of my hat and playing with them. He looked a bit silly. So I secretly took a photo. During the 3-day skiing trip, when I took out my phone to check the news again, I witnessed the video of the snow mountain collapse in Hua'inan Mountain. The ice waterfall broke at a speed of 2 seconds. Even if I watched it again, the scene was still extremely terrifying. Max. I didn't dare to look anymore. I closed my eyes and took a long time to recover. Then shrank into Max's arms. Shall we go to the temple to pray tomorrow? To bless us with all things going smoothly. Peace, to let out a low sigh. And joy? I'm telling you. It's very efficacious. Otherwise, I wouldn't have met you. Fortunately, I could save you. Okay. While I was chattering on, Max smiled, stroked my head, and murmured softly, anything you say is fine. Welcome. This is the end of the full text. Extra chapter, Male Lid's perspective. I was reborn. Before realizing this absurd thing, I dumped my head in the sink several times. The surrounding decoration remained the same. And in the mirror was still that handsome face. The only change was that the nanny at home saw me immersed in the water and unable to extricate myself. She thought I was going to commit suicide and called the police directly. Ms. Lynn, that is, my mother, when she heard the news, stopped playing Modhorn and rushed back quickly. Finally, having fulfilled my absai. Seeing that I was safe and sound, she even asked me to buy a set of jewelry as compensation. She said that if it weren't for me, she would have made a fortune. Regarding this, I just smiled and let her be. After Harold and I stayed out all night, several times, she seemed to become indifferent to everything, only numbing herself and playing Modhorn. This is for the better. It saves her from pain. After truly and fully accepting the fact of being reborn, I sat on the sofa at home and thought a lot about what would happen next. Accidentally seeing the photo on the wall, I squinted my eyes. Harold has been having affairs with different people for so long and has never been cheated. But before he died, someone came to the door with a paternity test. The woman brought a boy. I thought Harold wouldn't accept him, because he doesn't like boys. Also, when I was a child. Because of this, Harold took me out to play on the pretext of my mother being away from home. In fact, he led me into a dark and deep cave. The cave was carefully built by him. The moonlight couldn't shine in, and the entrance was blocked by an iron net. After doing this several times, I became afraid of the dark. Whenever I was in a place without light, my hearing would be amplified countless times. The cave was damp and dark. Reptiles and amphibians would appear at this time. I would become short of breath, have a palpitation, and even sweat all over, on the verge of fainting at any time. Until I was 12 years old, I was diagnosed with nyctophobia. And this boy has depression. Harold said righteously that after all, he's a child, and as an elder, he should take good care of him. He's only in high school. I couldn't help but find it funny. Then what was I? In my previous life, I was a much talked about figure in the whole city. After graduating from university, I devoted myself to work until I brought down the Harold family and then took it over personally, making it bigger bit by bit. I learned the news of Song's suicide by chance. That year, I had just finished a meeting. The people in the secretary department, because of the surname, became more curious and mentioned Song's name. I saw the video. Song died from cutting his wrist. The cause was campus bullying. But later I investigated and found that he originally had some psychological problems. But his mother, Zhang Ping, Annetta, had never cared about him and never took him for treatment. Now, thinking carefully, in my sophomore year of high school, I wasn't so decadent. At least I was living a glorious life. Forget it. He's just a kid. Why should I care? On the Dragon Boat Festival, I didn't go straight home after coming out of the company. Instead, I went to Song's residence according to the address. This community is a villa that Harold bought for their mother and son. The two of them have been living here for so long. The moment he saw me, a flash of surprise appeared on Song's face. It quickly turned into disgust. He asked me what I was doing here. I said I came to pick him up for dinner. He refused. On the weekend, I asked my assistant to wait for him at his home. I admit that I'm not a patient person. Fortunately, after several weeks of unremitting efforts, Song relented and agreed to return to the Harold family with me. However, the good times didn't last long. Ping found out about Song being brought back. That day, I was thinking that the slow-boiling frog in warm water it should have worked almost. It was time for Song to receive treatment. But there was a project that required me to go abroad at that time. When I came back, the servant let it slip. Song had been sent back to his hometown by my mother, and the school suspension procedures were being handled. I frowned tightly and rushed to Zhongyi again in a hurry. I didn't see him. Only from Song's neighbor did I know that he might have been abducted. And Ping ran away. Later, my assistant told me that Song had been found, but he was a changed person. To be honest, I really don't have that much time to take care of a kid. I just told someone to take him for treatment. But he really deserved a beating. He actually ran away. A week later, my assistant showed me a video of Song being bullied on the back hill. A green lotus leaf was covering his head, completely blocking his sight. His body was thin and hunched. After I finished my work, I went to his school to find him in person. As the saying goes, fortune is unpredictable, and misfortunes may happen at any time. The weather was bad that day, and the school had a power outage. Darkness is my weakness. A familiar sense of anxiety and palpitations welled up in my heart. I immediately took out my phone. At this time, Song's voice came. "Max, are you afraid of the dark?" He was laughing. In the darkness, I couldn't tell the direction. My palms were full of sweat, and my hands were trembling as I reached into my pocket. The environment on the back hill was bad, with potholed stones all over the place. My consciousness was constantly on the verge of collapsing, and my feet slipped. My phone flew out. "Max, when I was caught by those people and trapped in a sack, it was this dark too." After a long while, Song said mournfully or melancholic ally again. The surrounding sounds filled my mind like water, making me feel the approach of death once more. This rebirth, perhaps, isn't worth it. "Hello. Are you okay?" I don't know how long it took before someone kept shaking my shoulder. The person's voice was very soft, and the light from their hand shone on my face. At that moment, I felt like I had truly come back to life. I propped up my weak eyelids, trying hard to see who it was. But I could only see the sunflower bracelet on their hand. The next day, I woke up in the hospital. The nurse said that a cute-looking girl had brought me here. I saw her name on the record sheet. This name was very familiar. In my previous life, when I was taken to the countryside by Harold, she had also saved me. I opened Zhihu on my phone. In my previous life, I had written all about her on it. To avoid disturbing her life, I wrote it in a very veiled or cryptic way. This time, I didn't want to record it. I wanted to take action in person. I had always known that this girl liked snow, and her birthday was coming up. Then, I let out a low sigh. I'll build a snowman for her. I searched many types on the internet, while planning how to let her see them. My assistant suddenly told me that this girl was going to Huainan Mountain. In my impression, her family wasn't harmonious. I thought she should be very happy to be able to go out and play with her family this time. I cancelled my schedule, booked the earliest flight, and rushed to Huainan Mountain. At 5 a.m. It was freezing cold. I built snowman patterns that she was very likely to like in the places she might pass by. Along the way, heading southward session, people passing by were taking pictures. I endured the numbness and tried to find that familiar figure in the crowd. However, I still didn't find her. Finally, heading southward, I I saw her back at the end. But she was crying. Her small face was wrapped in a scarf. Her nose was red. And her eyes were wet. I looked back at the snow on the ground. Then at the materials on my body. Finally, having fulfilled my ipsi, I squatted down halfway and raised my stiff hand. She didn't see the snowman I had built all night. Now that I was making a new one on the spot, my movements were much slower. Fortunately, having fulfilled me. When I finished the third one, she looked over. I put my hands behind my back and met her bright eyes. This feeling was like a lifetime ago. I thought at that time that girls love taking pictures. Should I go up and ask her if she wants to take a picture? Just as I took a step, her mother suddenly came to find her. Perhaps the happiest thing was that she waved at me before leaving. Because of Song, I had formal contact with you when she was in her senior year of high school. When I picked him up from the police station, he told me what had happened. And then I knew that this little girl could fight. Thinking about her family situation and her staying alone in the room, I became his guardian. The young policeman talked a lot, always telling me to discipline him strictly after taking him back. I also thought about it. But it's better not to let her know. At least, not until she graduates. It might scare her. Until the day she moved. I specifically moved to the house next to hers. After that, every day, I would get dressed and go out in advance. Even choosing times that were not meal times. However, I never ran into her once. Strange. Why doesn't she go out? I couldn't figure it out. I also thought about taking this opportunity to visit her. But at this moment, the door next door opened. It was meal time at this moment. I opened the door and saw the little girl wearing a knitted sweater and carrying a brown bag, waiting for the elevator. At the moment when she was closing the door, I walked in quickly. The first time I was in the same space with her. The atmosphere was a bit awkward. I was nervous inside. But I remained as calm as a Buddha. Through the glass of the elevator, I could see from the corner of my eye that this girl would look at me from time to time. She should remember me. Right? I made sure to show my face at Huen and Mountain. But it seemed I was overthinking. She looked at me only a couple of times, and then retracted her gaze. Finally, having fulfilled my ipsi, I couldn't help but say hello to her. I smiled. Would this make a better impression? In order to make her remember me, I asked my assistant to insert several of my handsome photos accurately on the street LED screen every Friday. However, it didn't seem to work. Later, after adding her contact information, I found that this girl seemed to pay a lot of attention to Song. Many times she contacted me because of that kid. He clearly doesn't have much ability. Why does this little girl keep thinking about him? Am I not handsome enough? Or not rich enough? Or not young enough? After thinking pessimistically, I thought from her perspective. Because of this indirect connection, I could have contact with her. I searched for many ways. And before meeting her, I even practiced in advance what kind of words I should say so as not to scare her. But when we actually met, I forgot all of them. The conversation was normal. And she didn't seem to have a generation gap with me. Good. Very good. The time I took her to Zhangyi was probably the closest time we spent together. The little girl looked so cute when she was asleep. When I covered her with my clothes, she even burrowed in further, like a little rabbit. But does she dislike the smell on the clothes? She probably doesn't. She even said thank you to me. At the hospital that day, I was so afraid that this girl would cry that I could only tell her stories to distract her. To be honest, I really wanted to tell her. The girl who saved me was you. But I still couldn't say it. I thought this matter should probably be buried in my heart. Speaking of which, this little girl would blush. On the night when the hotel had a power outage, she hugged me. Thinking that sleeping on the floor must be uncomfortable, I simply carried her to the bed to sleep. Who knew that when she woke up the next day, she actually blushed. Just waking up, her serene face was suffused with an obvious blush. Even her speech became stuttering. I specifically searched on Baidu. And it said that when a girl blushes, it means she might have a crush. Was it when I built the snowman? Or when I carried her? Maybe it doesn't matter. Anyway, she had a crush. On the day the college entrance examination ended, we hugged in the corridor. And I clearly heard her heartbeat. Soon, let out a low sigh. I was the same. When she was 22. It was the third year we were together. I planned to propose to her on her birthday. Get married after she graduated. But she suddenly wanted to see snow. And go to Hua In Mountain. This place didn't seem that important. But it also seemed very important. Because, I had died there in my previous life. When I knew this girl was going to Hua In Mountain, I couldn't sleep for several nights. The night before our departure, I even dreamed of our child. A girl. Who looked a lot like her. You specifically built a snowman for me when I was 18. Right? At night. She murmured. Hugging me. She said that because of this, she wanted to go and see the place where we had been together. I hesitated. But in order not to disappoint her. It was just a hesitation. Unexpectedly, having fulfilled my upside. She, who was originally overjoyed, was in a bad mood when we arrived at the airport. Her eyes were red. I went over. Stroked the corner of her eye. And hugged her to comfort her. What's wrong? I don't want to go to Hua In Mountain anymore. She murmured softly in my arms. And I still heard it. I was surprised at first. Soon, let out a low sigh. She coquettishly told me the reason. I agreed. Looking at the flight information, I asked someone to stop the flight again. The process was tortuous. But fortunately, having fulfilled the result was good. We went to another place for a 3-day trip. That day, I told her what I was thinking in my heart and secretly measured Yu's finger circumference. Although she said she hadn't agreed yet, she was laughing happily. In the snowy winter, I hugged her tightly. Fortunately, having fulfilled I could return to her side again. Even get what I wished for. The end.